Welcome to the first Power Hour Community Meeting of 2022. I am Gail Jones-Carson, the Vice President of Community and External Affairs. Today, the Power Hour meeting will address vital topics related to you, our customers. Today, MLGW President and CEO, JT Young, will discuss infrastructure improvements, lessons learned from Winter Storm Landon, and MLGW projects. MLGW Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, Alonzo Weaver, will update you on MLGW's power supply evaluation. If you have any questions, please place them in the Q&A section of the Facebook Live. So, Mr. President, if you can start.
Well, good evening. Thank you, Gail. Appreciate that. And thank you for joining us. Those of you who've been able to join the Power Hour, I want to welcome you to this first Power Hour session of 2022. Time certainly moves swiftly, and we're certainly glad that you were able to join us. Again, I'm JT Young, President and CEO of MLGW. And tonight, as you heard Gail say, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the infrastructure improvements that's going on around MLGW, and then talk a little bit about the aftermath or the Winter Storm Landon. You all, I'm sure, we all experienced the storm last month. I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened during that storm, some lessons learned from that storm, and how we're moving forward. And so I look forward to engaging in that. And certainly, if you have questions, as you heard Gail say, please put those questions in the Q&A, and we'll be glad to address those questions. We also have with us and available to respond to your questions tonight, our Vice President and Chief Customer Officer, Jim West, and he will be able to engage as well on questions as we go. So again, welcome to the Power Hour, and I'll get started now and just kind of begin talking a little bit about what I always like to talk about, which is our mission and vision. Our mission is to safely deliver services that create and sustain superior customer experiences. We are driven by this. This is always at the forefront of all that we do. We want to make sure that we keep all the components of that mission in mind, and you'll see that when we talk about the restoration process and what went on during the storm last month. Safety is so important, and making sure that we are delivering those services that you, our customers, value, and doing it in the way that you expect us to. Our vision, of course, where we're headed is to be the trusted provider of exceptional customer value in these communities that we're really privileged and blessed to serve. And we know that through vehicles like this, we are able to engage with you and give you information to help increase that trust. We want to make sure that we remain transparent and open about things that are going on, share with you when we fail, and certainly want your input tonight to help us to continue to get better. So we look forward to the conversation. So speaking about the improvement plan, there's a 5-year service improvement plan that I'm sure some of you may have heard about. We call it our MLGW Way Forward plan. And really the goal was to just ensure that we are doing what we said in our mission and vision, delivering exceptional customer value, and that we're optimizing that, both from an operational efficiency standpoint and also more tangible from an infrastructure improvement standpoint. We did have a consultant come in a few years ago and benchmark our operations and give us some input around things that we needed to do with our infrastructure. A company called HDR Engineering was employed to kind of help us look at our infrastructure to see what we needed to do, and they did just that. We're now beginning the 3rd year of that 5-year improvement plan that was approved by the MLGW board as well as the city council about 2 years ago. That's, as I said, mix of operational efficiencies. The way we're going to fund this was through savings and issuing debt, as well as rate increases, the last of which just went into effect in January. And, you know, we all recognize the need for infrastructure improvement, and that was part of the reason why, the biggest reason why we pushed so hard and are so grateful to our board and to the city council for approving our ability to do this. So just as I mentioned, the engineering firm that was involved did a risk severity analysis. They couldn't do a very, very deep dive, but they did enough to help us understand that we needed to make some improvements, most of which we already knew, but it was really a confirming of our infrastructure needs that we had. And I'm going to talk to you about some examples in each of our areas, in the electric division, the gas division, as well as in the water division. So from the electric perspective, just to give you an idea of what those were and kind of a year-end 2021 status of where we are with these improvements. If concerning this table sort of shows you the actual actions and the cost that we were planning to spend over the 5 years for each of those areas, and where we are through the end of last year and what's remaining. So you will see that substation equipment, infrastructure in our substations that really need to be replaced because of age and whatnot. We're about 43%. That's that first row. We're about 43% of the way. So right about on target spending wise with where we would be on a 5-year plan. The next one is tree trimming. Of course, that's something that we have been struggling with, and we are a little bit behind on that, where we should be on tree trimming for a number of reasons, not the least of which is we have contracts with 2 large tree trimmers. Getting labor going through COVID has been a bit of a challenge. We're looking to get caught up with that. We are working diligently to find other ways to get that done, but that is a big deal. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Underground cable, grid modernization, which is really about installing what's called distribution automation to make it to help make these outages a lot less frequent and certainly shorter in duration. So having automated technology out on our distribution system to automatically do some things on our system much more quickly than we can manually when there are outages is what that's about. And then on wood poles, again, we're on track for that, replacing wood poles where we had some that needed to be replaced, and we're moving forward on that. The underground cable I'll mention is something that is a very big deal. Underground cable fails. They don't last, underground systems don't last as long as overhead systems. And so that's a part of our electric investment that we're making over the 5-year plan. So a lot of work to do, but the highlighted part there at the bottom will tell you that, looking at a comparison between 2021 and 2019, we have seen about a 20% improvement in the number of minutes our customers have been out. Now that's system-wide. That doesn't mean that everybody experienced that. But when we look at the total system, we've seen about a 20% reduction in outage minutes. Our goal with this plan was to be at about 50% fewer outage minutes by the end of the 5-year period. So we're tracking, if you will, on our way to that goal. On the gas side, we've completed a fair amount of these projects, the biggest of which was this, the system, we've got a regulatory on reliability and system integrity plan. We are working on that. A large project that was completed, the cast iron retrofit on our gas mains was finished back in the fall. That was a really, really significant project that began about 30 years ago. That project has wrapped up, and we have, and it's a safety-oriented project. Most people don't see what's going on with our gas system because it exists predominantly underground. But I will say, in conjunction with tomorrow being a day that we recognize nationally our gas workers across the country, they've worked very hard to do a great job in making sure that system is maintained. And you can see here that we've got still more work to do, but these projects are tracking on the gas side as well. And then on the water side, who can forget last year, the challenges that we had with our water distribution system. We realized several years ago that we've got pumping station opportunities and our wells need to be upgraded and new wells need to be developed. We got a number of initiatives that's going on the water side, and you can see here that many of those are well on the way. We are struggling a little bit on our pumping station rehabilitation, and that's primarily due, again, to getting contracts done. I'll speak about that here in just a minute. And those have lagged a little bit, but we're going to get caught up with those, I think, and going to be moving along pretty well. Lead service line replacements. We had a great year last year replacing lead service lines, exceeded really our target. Still got a little ways to go on that, but that's moving along as well. just to give you an idea of some of the contracts that have been approved to help with our existing personnel. Our existing personnel are doing a lot of this work as well, but on the electric side, we have had these contracts that we've led, and these are the within the last year and a half. So that's a little bit of the reason for the lag in getting some of these things completed. You will note that both of these contracts were established late in the year. Well, the last one was established in the fall of last year, the first one back in the spring of last year. And so taking us a little while to get those off the ground. Again, we have tree contractors that do both Asplin and ABC, are our tree trimming contractors. Those are moving along, but they're having a labor, especially Asplin, having a lot of labor challenges to get those things done. And we also have a contract that was just approved by our board in the council in February of this year to get some substation work done around construction and maintenance services. So that's going on, has been going on. So just to say to you that a lot of things are happening to help improve our infrastructure. We want to do more. We're going to continue to do more, and we're very, very focused on that. So the point I want to make sure everyone understands tonight is that there's a lot of work that's going on and a lot yet to be done. The biggest thing to remember is on the electric side, notwithstanding the challenges we saw last month with this winter storm, we have begun to see some improvement in performance and reliability on our electric system, and we want to see more. Let me spend a few minutes talking about the Winter Storm Landon and make sure, do you know if we have any questions on before I, okay, we can come back to those when I'm done. We'll take care of those here in just a minute. We will get to your questions, but let me spend a few minutes talking about Winter Storm Landon. Let's see. Okay, big storm. Everybody remembers this. Over 2,200 miles. We shared this with our board and the city council. Want to make sure you all have an opportunity to see this presentation as well. This storm was massive and covered a large area. You'll hear me talk about two different numbers tonight. When I talk about outages, you'll hear the number 186,000, and you'll also hear the number 233,640. Those two numbers represent outages that our customers experience. So the 186,000 number represents the peak number of outages. So if you look at any given time during the time of the storm, at any one time, the peak number of customers that were out at any one time was 186,000. Total customers impacted, though, over the course of the storm, 233,640 customers experienced an outage over that course of time. And then the restoration hours of 272 hours you see there. Massive storm, national attention, of course, a lot going on. Let me give you some historical context of this storm. We've got a lot of major storms in the Memphis area in the past several years. You'll see this list here that shows that the Winter Storm Landon was the 4th largest event. So when you look back over the history of storms, this one ranks number 4. And if you look at the duration or the outage duration of this storm, it is about in line with what we saw back in 2017 during the Tom Lee storm, with about the same number of customers at the peak that were interrupted. So it was, of course, a massive storm, and it impacted customers for a while. But I wanted everybody to kind of see where this storm stacks up relative to those other storms. We do a lot to prepare for storms internally. We have an emergency response plan that was activated, and we have a lot of activities that we go through internally to prepare to restore customers after an outage. That went into effect. We actually even had a pre-event team meeting with the crisis team internally to talk about getting things ready and prepared. So when you think about it, I know many of you saw this damage firsthand. Of course, many of you were impacted. A lot of our customers were impacted. These are just some photos of the damage that occurred across our service area. As you know, we serve all of Shelby County. We serve electricity across the entire county, and these are just some photos. And I spent a good bit of time out in the field with many of our crews. And this particular photo here is showing the beginning of the restoration period. This is over on Kendall, where we had a triple circuit scenario that was affecting a lot of customers. It took a good bit of time to restore. But we were so grateful for not just our crews who worked diligently, but there were a number of crews that came in to assist us. I'll talk about those numbers in just a little bit. Day and night, of course, restoring. And even in hard to get to areas, I want you to pay attention here, was an area that was up in I went out to this area as well. This was in the Raleigh area, but it was a rear lot line area, very hard to get to, where our crews had to actually manually bring in a lot of material to get a 13 pole line, those 13 poles that came down because trees pulled them down that had to be reinstalled. So just a lot of things I wanted to make sure that everyone understood. Now let's spend a quick minute on the prioritization of restoration and how we do that. I'll just quickly cover that. Number one, we always make sure that safety is paramount. It's the first thing we consider. So we want to make sure that anything affecting public health or safety facilities like water pumping stations and other important critical locations, those are top of the list. And we actually in this storm had several of our pumping stations impacted. Customers did not recognize adverse impact on our water system, primarily because of the great work that a lot of our crews did, as well as we had to call on TVA, who operates a plant here, to reduce their water consumption during that time to help us with some things in the first day or two of this particular outage. So it was a pretty significant event, but those are the things we try to do first. Let's get the hospitals, let's get those critical police, fire, critical customer situations. And then we start working on what we call circuits. And circuits, if you'll look at this area, these you see them, you go down Poplar Avenue, you go down, most of your main roads, you will see lines that represent what we call circuits. And those circuits carry anywhere from 1,000 to maybe 1,500, 1,600 customers are served from those circuits. So we really want to focus on getting those circuits back up next, because that's where we can get most customers brought back on the quickest. We do not restore service by areas. We do not look at locations, residential, and we don't look at that. We look at where the customers, how many customers are being affected by those outages. And so once we get those circuits back up, then we go what we call downstream and start looking at other areas, other types of circuits that maybe rear lot lines where that need to be restored. But we want to get these circuits back up first, because if you can imagine, much like in your home, if your main circuit breaker is off, then trying to fix a receptacle in your kitchen doesn't really make a lot of sense, because you don't have power at the main breaker. So you want to go fix that main breaker first, then you want to go to the kitchen and start dealing with that receptacle. So that's kind of the premise behind this. And when we do an assessment, it's kind of like the patient that comes in, the trauma patient that comes in, got a lot of injuries, right? And if they've got internal bleeding, that needs to be dealt with probably before a broken arm. Not that the broken arm is not important, but you got internal bleeding and you're trying to save the life. So from a prioritization standpoint, that's the approach we try to take on getting our system restored. So from a timeline standpoint, I think it's important to look at what happened during this winter storm. And if you look at this chart, you can see back to that 186,000, these are peak numbers of customers on a daily basis that were out. You can kind of see how that trended down pretty significantly, actually, because we did bring back those circuits. We're able to get those circuits back on. But then when you get towards the last several days of the restoration, it's just the hardest, because that's when you got the customers that are, maybe have real lot lines or single outages or smaller clusters of customers, maybe 30 or 40 customers instead of 1,500. And that takes a lot more time to get restored. And so this is just to give you an idea of how that went it was an 11:59 every day that you see these numbers that we were tracking. So let's just some factors to consider that I want us to kind of just quickly cover that I think is important. I talked about safety. We make sure that when we deploy our resources, we're thinking about safety. We're thinking about how to keep them safe, how to keep the public safe. We want to make sure we get as many resources as we can in the restoration process, but we want to do it safely. So we've got to have provisions for them. They've got to, be able to communicate so that we don't get folks hurt when they're out doing the work that they need to do. A lot of the contract crews that we were trying to get could not be released, as you saw how massive that storm was, until the storm effects were no longer present in their area. So we kind of had to wait in getting some of that assistance. We really know that there were some significant issues with the outage text alerts. We have been well aware of that. So much of the damage that we had to our infrastructure actually damaged the communication infrastructure that we use to provide information through that texting system. And so we had just rolled that system out. It works very well on days like today. If there's an outage, it works very well. But when so much of our infrastructure was damaged like it was before, makes it a real challenge. And we learned a lot from that. I'll talk about some of the learnings here in just a minute. We assign our crews to the sources of the problem, which may not always be visible to customers. You may not always see them, right? The average length of a circuit that we have is about 5 miles. So there's very likely that there'll be work going on where customers may not see that work and may not think that things are happening, but they are. And also crews may come and assess damage and leave without really doing any work because they're doing just that. They're assessing the damage, and they're gonna, the process that we use allows for that damage assessment to be collected and prioritized. And as I said earlier, we want to make sure that we're bringing on the most customers at a time to optimize our efforts. And we always make sure that we share with the public to stay away from downlines, treat all downlines as energized. And whether you think it's a communication line or not, just stay away from them. We also always communicate that. This may be a little hard to see, but this is just to give you a picture of where the outages were across our system in terms of a percentage of total customers in each of these areas. Now, we do have this broken out by city council district, Memphis city council districts, but we also have it by all municipalities around Shelby County. And so what you will notice is you will see of the customers who experienced outages, that's the 233,000 customer number, right? That represented about 55% of all customers experienced some form of an outage during Landon. And so you can see the areas most affected in that District 5 area there, where 73% of those customers experienced an outage. Heavily treed area. It's an area with a lot of trees, a lot of rear lot line construction, and that certainly had an impact. But again, this is just to give you a picture of what happened during the storm in terms of customers that were affected. I spoke about trees. You can see from this particular slide the density of tree coverage in our area, and you can see there District 5 has a lot of tree density, as does a number of areas throughout our service area, but that created lots of challenges during this storm. I talked about resources earlier, but if you want to think about how, as we were beginning to do the restoration process, we really had a crews of over 1,100. That was just people out in the field, 1,100 people. That doesn't count the number of people that were back, working to get resources for them, folks in our call center, folks doing things behind the scenes to support all that work that was going on. But there were a lot of folks that were out deployed getting power restored. A lot of communication efforts, these dashboards, I won't go through all of them, but one of the things that we did was we really on the fly began to create some new dashboards that we'll be using going forward that helped as we did our daily press briefings, for example, on what was happening, what was transpiring, where are our crews working. That bottom left map, again, it may be hard to see, but those blue dots shows where our crews were relative to those outages, which were the green dots. But it just kind of to give you an idea, help folks see where do we have crews assigned. And then the bottom right map is a map that sort of shows red dot shows outages, blue dot shows restoration. So it's a progression we could show really on an hourly basis, but on a daily basis, we updated that to show the progression of restoration throughout the process. We learned a lot of community outreach. Gail Jones-Carson is on the call on this tonight. She did the intro. Gail's team, very engaged in community outreach during this time, engaging with our customers, Jim West's team, who's on here tonight as well, and his folks in the call center are constantly talking to customers about ways that they can get assistance and help with a number of things. And so that was going on quite a bit. Speaking of the call center, the customer care center, this is just to give you an idea of the calls that were taken on an average day. The customer care center handles about 4,000 calls, that's what that orange line represents. And you can see how those calls went during the course of the storm, over 11,000 on the first day. And of course, lots of frustration, we understand, with getting in, getting information, all of that, we understand. This is a chart that shows you what happened with our outage hotline. The outage hotline is the number that we encourage folks to call to report the outage. Almost 170,000 calls. This is a lot. It's an automated system, but that's how many calls we took on the first day. That would have been on the 3rd of February, and you can see how that trailed off. But again, it's a very efficient way. We encourage customers to call when they are out and make sure that we are aware of the outage. That's really important. Overhead versus underground, there's a lot of discussion about that. 40% of our distribution system is already underground. So that's important to know. And this is a comparison against some of the other power companies in the Valley area. But we have about 40%. And it is a tall order to think about putting everything underground. That may or may not make sense, as we've probably heard us talking about, but it's certainly something to consider in most cases. So it's about $1.3 million per mile to convert an overhead line to underground. That does not include the cost to get services, underground services, to the structures, a home or a business. So it's a very costly endeavor and something that deserves some consideration. And I will say that one of the things that we've learned a lot, and I'll tell you some of the lessons we learned was with regards to the communication system. We disabled that once we knew it wasn't functioning right, because we knew it was confusing customers, and so we had to make sure that we were taking steps to pull that down and not confuse customers so much. We also are learning a lot around our restoration efforts in general. Making sure that we are thinking about, we just had a debriefing call last Friday where we're doing deep dives on ways to get better at the restoration process. Those maps that I showed you in terms of being able to communicate more, not just during, but in advance. We want to make sure our customers understand before the storm hits things that they need to do. We do send out communication, but we need to do that even more, making sure that our customers are aware of things that are important. So a number of things that we've thought about that we are going to need to move forward with. Some of you are familiar with the Outage Improvement Advisory Team, which had its first meeting today. That's the team that Mayor Strickland reached out to me and talked about, and we pulled that together, having its first meeting today. It's going to last a couple of 3 months. We are getting input from this team regarding outage improvement opportunities, ways to minimize outages. This was the 4th largest storm event in our history, and we're going to always have outages. We want to make sure those outages are minimized, and we know that customers don't really want to have to think about, their electric service, their power. They don't want to have to think about that. We are working, as I mentioned earlier, to improve restoration and the communication process based on the lessons we've learned. And we're looking at strategic underground conversions as part of our 5-year plan. We want to make sure that and that's part of the process of improving reliability. As I said, we're in the beginning of the 3rd year, roughly 25% of the way on that process to make things better. But we're going to take input from this outage team, this outage advisory team, as well, to see if we can do things to expedite that. So grateful to all the folks who worked hard to get things done and to help us get service restored, and want to make sure that we continue to find ways to make service, get service better, make service better for our customers. With that, I know we've got several questions. I think I'll leave it to you, Gail, and others who want to try to jump in here. Let's go ahead and let Alonzo do the power supply, and then we'll do questions at the end. Want to do that?
Yes, that'll work. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you.
Alonzo?
Thank you, Nathan. Just want to take this opportunity to talk to you a little bit about MLGW's power supply RFP update. Just give you a little background. MLGW has been working on RFPs to determine if there's a savings out there if we make a change, lead TVA, and then contract with other power supply providers. 2021, we had following activities that took place. We worked on thermal generation RFP, renewable RFP, and a transmission RFP. We're going to talk to you a little bit about how the status of those and the upcoming activities and next steps that we'll be taking. So the thermal generation RFP was to acquire PPAs. These are power purchase agreements for local natural gas fired generation. The RFPs were issued to vendors on these requests for proposals were issued to vendors on August the 6th, and we received vendor proposals on December the 9th. Now, once we got the proposals in, we offered an opportunity for vendors to make some cures or clarifications to their proposals. So those were submitted on January 7th, and we received the cured proposals on February 9th. We also put out a request for proposal for renewables. That's mainly solar, but also MISO, and MISO is the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, and any other alternative solutions. So it wasn't just a renewable solution, but also alternative resources and solutions for providing power to the customers of MLGW. The RFPs were issued to vendors on September the 14th. We received vendor proposals on December 6th. MLGW issued cure and clarification letters to vendors who submitted non-conforming proposals on January 5th, and we got the cured proposals on February 9th on renewable and RFPs, renewable and other solutions. Then we also submitted requests for proposal on transmission. In order to leave TVA and get access to some of the power that's in the MISO region, we would have to build transmission facilities going into Arkansas and Mississippi. We issued the RFP to vendors on July the 12th of 2021, and we received vendor proposals on February 4th. We issued cure letters on March the 4th, and we expect updated proposals on April the 4th. So what have we been doing? We've been getting RFPs in and issuing cure letters and getting cure letters back. So that's been the big process that's happened January 8th. We've initiated some preliminary evaluations on thermal and renewable RFPs. We've asked MISO to update their resource adequacy study. And we've gotten, of course, the transmission RFP proposals in. We're going to be working through the various evaluations from January to June. We're going to present to our board and city council we're going to present to the board and the city council our preliminary findings. We wanted to say to them whether or not there is the savings there that we saw in the IRP that we did and the integrated resource plan. So we'll basically say if the savings are there, then we'll go forward with additional conversations and discussions with the various vendors to try to work out contracts. And then at the end of the year, we will be determining whether or not we have a notice to proceed or not a notice to proceed, but a notice of a potential award to some vendors in the various categories. So this is a big decision. It's a deliberate decision. We have help in working through this decision. We contracted with GDS, a consultant who does this type of work, does this type of analysis. The process involves getting the RFPs in, doing the analysis, and then once we get to a notice of award, potential award, then the RFPs will be released for public view. So those are the basic steps that we have going forward. Someone asked that I explain what a cure is. You get a proposal in, and maybe there's some questions as to what they meant by their analysis or what they proposed, then we may put a cure letter out and ask them to explain what's in their RFP, and they get that back to us. That's basically what a cure process is. And that's all I have at this time. So put your questions in the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Alonzo. Jim West also has some questions that he wanted to address.
Yes, thank you. There have been a number of questions come in the chat and the Q&A related to customer service issues. So if I could just take a couple of minutes, I'll try to respond to these. And if someone has responded in a written form already and I'm repeating something, I apologize. I can't see all of the chat traffic that's going on. So why are the payment machines not working to take payments at the local offices? If you've been a customer for a while, you will remember that we used to have payment kiosks, and that kiosk vendor went out of business in early 2018. And it's a significant investment to replace that. And candidly, we've had other priorities like the MLGW Way Forward 5-year service improvement plan that we've been focused on. So for payments, you can still make payment in person at the drive-through locations at our community offices. This also addresses another question that came in about the need for in-person payment locations. There are more than 180 authorized payment locations in Shelby County. Those include all the Kroger's, Dollar General, Family Dollar. There are a number of other smaller, more independent locations. And payments made at the authorized pay locations post to a customer's account within 30 minutes. So again, almost 200 locations where you go in and make a payment, and that posts to your account in almost real time. It posts within 30 minutes. So hopefully that alleviates some of the concern about there being a limited number. I think someone might have answered this about the smart meters and providing updates on power restoration. And the short answer is this ice storm was such a significant event that not only did it take down our power system in places, it took down our communication system to our smart meters. So we were hampered in our ability to communicate in a timely manner to those smart meters. In smaller scale events, that's a much different situation that'll give much more timely information. And I think we are looking at a number of ways to improve based on lessons learned from ice storm in February about timely and accurate communications to customers. One of the best ways is to download the My Account app, and that personalizes information to your specific address and account, and you can get updates by texting or querying for a power outage update through the app. Let's see. If I want a representative transfer you to a supervisor or manager, that is largely because there's not one available at the time. If you've called our call center recently, we are very busy. So if you're not able to be transferred to a supervisor or manager, it's because that individual is tied up assisting someone else at the moment. So our practice is to get a contact number from a customer that desires to speak with a supervisor, and you'll get a call back that same day. Why are the lobbies still closed? As the world is opening up, that's a fair question. We have gone 2 full years now with our lobbies at the community offices closed to walk-in customers. And we are examining the options for the future as we speak. So expect an update on that in the next month or so. First and foremost, we will always be focused on the safety and well-being of our customers and our employees in those locations. Let's see. Some of these others are largely related to outage restoration, power system, tree trimming.
Yeah, so Jim, I can throw the next one
Yes.
to Alonzo.
Excellent, thank you.
The question is, we learned from one of the crews in our area that they weren't contacted until Monday after the storm to assist. They indicated that they expected to be contacted prior to the storm, but weren't. How will additional crews be on standby in the future? Hotel rooms were reserved for them in our city and county. They had to stay in Jackson, for example. And by the way, the MLGW workers with whom we spoke were working so hard and were very much doing what they could to restore the power. So Alonzo, can you address those concerns?
Certainly, thank you very much. First of all, we did contact crews prior to the storm. Not all crews that came in and worked the storm were contacted prior to the storm. We ramp up that activity. And Mr. Young mentioned you have to kind of wait, various areas have to kind of wait until the storm is passed before they're released. See, these crews are already working someplace else. They're assigned to some other utility doing whatever. And they have to be released by their home utilities to come work with us. So we put out the broadcast that we need crews. And then crews get sent to us as they become available. But we got crews in probably within the first 24 hours of the storm or less to come in and work with us. And then we ramped up as time went on.
So Alonzo, one of the questions that we get a lot is, say, for example, the National Weather Service says a storm is going to come. So many of our customers feel or wonder why we don't have crews here sitting on the ground outside. We do have our crews here, but they want to know why we don't have outside crews here before a storm hits. Can you address that?
Yes, so we, like I said, we put in the request for crews, and the crews usually come after the storm has passed because they have to see what the impact will be at their home utility. So they may come from various locations, and we put out a broadcast to various utilities. So it comes in after usually the day of or the day after. We put in an advance notice. We may put more in and in advance notice depending on the severity of the storm. Sometimes we get crews in early, sometimes we don't.
Okay, thank you for that. So our next question is, how there's supposed to be a storm next week.
Hey, let me hang on one second, Gail, I'm sorry.
Okay.
One other part of that question that I think is relevant that I don't know if they talked about hotel rooms and things of that nature, the logistics. I think that's important to point out to your point, Alonzo. And I think customers should also know during this storm, getting hotel rooms was a bit of a challenge too. So you can't just bring folks in. You have to make sure they have a place to stay. They've got to be fed. There are a host of logistics that go to bringing people in. And so we have a team as part of that crisis management team that works with hotels to ensure that we have places for lodging. In this particular case, a number of those hotels were not available for a number of reasons. Either they didn't have power, or local, residents had to find somewhere to stay because they didn't have power. So that just created a little bit more of a challenge. But we do have a logistics team that works on that as well. I just want to throw that in there.
And President Young, one of the things I learned too during this last storm is those crews can't just stay in any hotel. Like for as example, the hotels downtown, they have to stay at hotels that can handle large equipment. Isn't that correct, Alonzo?
Yes, it's very helpful if there's enough parking area for their crews. Each crew may have 3 or 4 pieces of large equipment that they have to.
Okay, so anything you, President?
No, that's it. I'm done. Thanks. That's fine.
Okay, so the next question is that we're supposed to have a storm next week. is predicted, and Shelby Farms has no way to know of tornado warnings when power is out. Most of us are too far out to hear the sirens, especially in the middle of the storm. So is MLGW responsible for the sirens?
MLGW is not responsible for the sirens. That's an interesting question. We probably need to toss it over to EMA for them to address that.
Okay, thank you, Alonzo, for that. I think it bears consideration to have a plan in place to rotate the restoration of services to customers. Each time there is a major outage, the communities with our most vulnerable citizens languish for days or weeks without power. And I think, JT, that you did address the order in which power outages are handled, but would you want to kind of reiterate that for any of our viewers or listeners who may have missed that?
And we shared this, with the council as well, because I certainly understand that there are frustrations associated with restoration at times when it appears that some customers are frequently without power and are frequently without power for a while. And there are a number of factors that go into that. But what I really want, and I think it's important for all of our customers to understand, and I'll say it again, we don't restore power based on location. We don't, that's not how we prioritize restoration. We can't actually do that. That's a very inefficient way to do it because it would take a very long time. We have to look at the way the system is configured and restore customers based on as I said earlier, the greatest number of customers that we can pick up for the effort that we put forth. And the real issue is damage occurs differently in different storms. And so where you may have a lot of tree damage in this storm, you may have a lot of pole damages in another storm. But the restoration process takes into account where we can pick up the most customers first. That's really the restoration process. If we come to a community or a neighborhood, but we haven't restored the circuit that feeds that neighborhood, that's really wasted time because we then, we're working to get fuses back in, but we haven't done the main circuit. Back to my example about your main circuit breaker, going to fix that before we go fix the kitchen outlet. So that's just to kind of help shape that. It's really important to remember that process. And Alonzo, and it's a standard. This, by the way, is not unique to MLGW. But Alonzo, do you want to mention anything else? So,
and we deploy resources throughout our service area because there are circuits in our entire service area. What you find is in the older parts of town, you find a lot of rear property line work. It's just a more complicated system to restore. There's more damage that occurs because of trees and the location of the lines in association to those trees. And it just takes more time. For 16 hours of effort, you get fewer customers on than if you just work in one place. So it's not that we are not concentrating on particular areas. We are absolutely sending people in to work in these areas. It just takes more time to get it done.
So Alonzo, this may be a question for you. Thank you for that response. When trees are trimmed by MLGW while the limbs just dropped on the property, all residents are not able to carry those limbs to the curb.
Yeah, particularly in a restoration event, that's exactly what happens. We tend to leave the limbs. I understand that that's an issue. We'll take that back, but I'm not sure what we can do on that right now.
Okay, so Mr. President, you may have addressed the pros and cons of having underground lines versus above overhead poles and lines.
Yeah, just to reiterate, one of the things, so from an aesthetic standpoint, underground, everything's gone. You can't see it, so it's really a cool thing. It looks great. A couple of things to remember about underground. Number one, I talked about the cost. It's certainly more costly to install, especially if you already have an overhead system. Converting overhead to underground is very costly. Secondly, it's certainly more costly to maintain underground lines because you have to find the problem and you have to repair it. It takes a much longer time to repair underground systems versus overhead systems. The other thing to consider is when you're dealing with overhead versus underground is that underground systems don't last as long as overhead distribution systems. An overhead distribution system, some of these overhead systems that we have here have been around for decades and decades, maybe 6 or 7 decades, right? Underground systems do not last that long. You will have to replace underground systems more frequently. So that's another consideration. It doesn't mean you don't do it. And I think I may have mentioned the term strategic underground. That's something that we really want to look at, and the outage improvement advisory team is probably going to help us with that. And certainly your input tonight would be helpful for that too. But we know there may be some areas where we've got rear lot lines or something, for example, that may make sense to bring that out. But I do want to remind everyone that going from an overhead to an underground system doesn't just mean that main line out on the street goes underground. It means everything to the premise has to be converted, which means that's just a bigger challenge. But again, something we certainly want to make sure we consider. Newer subdivisions, newer developments that were developed over the last 25, 30 years or so, maybe 30 or 40 years, underground was beginning to be much more popular, and developers had an option, many of them, to go underground or overhead. Those who chose to go underground, that's why you see a lot of the maybe developments that came in the late 70s and 80s. Many of those newer developments are underground for that reason. So I just want to throw that in there too.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. We do have one question concern a person who mentioned that they were out for X number of days and they filed a claim, and they are concerned about having a response to their claim. So what are your plans to follow up on property damage claims that now it's now been several weeks later?
Yeah, Don, or I want to ask Don or someone else to post in the chat the number for the claims area. If you have a specific issue that's claims related, that is certainly something that you want to take up with our claims area, especially if you've already filed a claim. But if you're talking about concerns around damage, that you think there may be a need for a claim, and I don't know what the specifics are for this question, but certainly I want to make sure that we post that the number in the chat for the claims area. Okay,
so someone's asking, and you may have addressed this with the infrastructure information you provided, what is MLGW doing to make improvements to their equipment and reliability to Memphians, so Memphians aren't worried during a storm?
Well, Alonzo can help me with this, but I did talk about this a little bit in the infrastructure piece, and I will say that we made a plan. We have a 5-year plan to improve our infrastructure. The goal of that plan, if you will recall, was to reduce outage minutes by 50% based on 2019 levels. That was our target, so that by the end of 2025, what efforts we would have exerted would have resulted in about a 50% improvement in outage minutes. That does not mean that outages will go away. That does not mean that storm damage will not occur. That is still going to happen. It is certainly, and no matter how you're served, overhead or underground, outages will occur. So we are doing a number of things. I delineated some of those, everything from tree trimming, pole replacement, substation equipment, change out distribution automation, putting units out in our system that will help automatically restore power at times as best we can be done when it's feasible. A number of things like that are going on. And the notion of strategic undergrounding, or whether or not we do more underground than we already have, is on the table. Everything's really on the table to consider. That's what the outage team is trying to work with us on. Alonzo, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you covered it, JT. We have a lot of initiatives that are going forward to take care of various problems within, or pain points within our system. Tree trimming is a major part of that. being able to trim the trees properly and getting them on a cycle that gets them trimmed so that they don't damage or minimizes the damage to our lines that serve you. We have, one of the things you got to consider in an ice storm is that you have, and in some windstorms, you have some rather large trees that come down. And we're not trimming for a 75-foot tree that falls on our line. We're trimming on a 3-phase line, we're trimming 15 feet on each side of that pole line for a 3-phase line, and then 10 feet on each side for a single-phase line. But large trees that are in the yard that need to be addressed, they need to be addressed. And that's a bigger issue. And that's something that I'm sure that the outage improvement team is going to be looking at, but the customers need to think about as they have trees on their properties. But that's not the only thing we're doing. We're taking care of pole replacements. We've identified poles that need to be replaced, and we're moving along with that. And we're on target with that particular assignment. Things within the substations, that we're changing those, and we're on target with those replacements. Distribution automation, which is going to help a lot with providing an opportunity to switch remotely and heal the system in a way that takes less time and minimizes the number of customers that are out. We're implementing that as well. So we're 2 years in. We got a lot of work to do. It's going to take a pretty good effort to get that done, but we're optimistic that the customers will see a benefit in the outage minutes once we get those various initiatives implemented.
And so when you mentioned that we're 2 years in, that's 2 years of our 5-year plan, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so as you mentioned trees, the next question is, what does MLGW proactively do to partner with residents to identify and fix potential problems such as overhanging tree limbs before the weather gets bad? I noticed that several providers in the city drive past situations daily that they could make the time to call attention to or actually address. The mentality seems to be more reactive versus proactive. Being proactive helps us in a long term. So this customer wanted to know about us working with customers before, weather gets bad with trees and stuff. And Alonzo, I don't know if you touched on our daily annual tree trimming program that we're trimming trees every day for our customers.
Yes, we're tree trimming every day. We've been working at probably a 4 or 5 year cycle. We want to get that down to a 3-year cycle. We have 2 contractors on board to do that. It is a challenging problem to solve. There's some workforce issues as far as getting enough workforce in to actually achieve the targets that we have established. We're working with the contractors to try to remedy that, but we're going to make a very strong effort to get that down to a 3-year cycle. And 3-year cycle is industry best practice, and that's what we're targeting to do. So that will take care of the lines within that 10 to 15 or 20 to 30 foot corridor around the pole. So that's the first step. So that's what we're working to do.
So Alonzo, when you say a 3-year cycle, does that mean that once every 3 years, MLGW will trim my trees if they are, close to the MLGW lines?
That is the goal, to have them touched every 3 years, the ones to buy a tree trimmer to make sure that they are away from the lines.
Okay, and so Jim, you may have touched on this, but we do have a question or a comment that says there's a great need for the community based in-person payment locations. The current locations are taxed with servicing a significant number of customers.
Yeah, I think I might have addressed that earlier, but let me just say again, there are more than 180 authorized pay locations across Shelby County. That includes all the Krogers, all the Dollar Generals, all the Family Dollars, and then there's a host of smaller independent retail locations that you can walk in and pay your bill. They are tied directly into our system. So a payment made at one of these authorized pay locations posts to a customer's account within about 30 minutes. So if it's simply a payment transaction that you're interested in, there are far more options than going to a community office that, you're right, is busy at the moment with drive-through traffic and drop box traffic since the lobbies aren't open. But again, if you go to MLGW.com and click on the payment link, that'll take you to a link for payment locations. You can search by zip code, and it brings up a map. There are dozens and dozens in every zip code area. So I encourage you, if it's simply a payment transaction, do take advantage of our authorized pay locations tied directly into our system. It's not quite real time, but within 30 minutes, that payment will post to a customer account.
Thank you, Jim. And we do have one more that you might want to address, and that is one major issue with MLGW in both emergent and daily business is access to staff by phone within a reasonable amount of time. Have you considered creating a relay with 311, which receives many requests regarding street lights, poles, and infrastructure issues? Many in the public do not realize that 311 and MLGW are separate entities. It was seen creating a simple communication and response flow. Email or even utilizing the city's C-Click Fix app could help assure residents that there are response inbound during non-emergent situations. Of course, I am referring to non-emergent maintenance issues. So basically they would, I guess the question is, us partnering with 311 or having something similar with 311, that many people think that MLGW is already a part of the 311 system.
Yeah, that's actually a great comment. We do a fair amount of referral back and forth with the 311 folks. It's sort of a manual process at the moment. Linking with them automatically is not something we've thought about yet. So that's a good suggestion that we'll look into. We do have in our plans to create a similar app for MLGW specific issues like street lights, street cuts where there might be need to remove cones or something like that. So we actually have that in our plan to develop something similar to the C-Click Fix app that 311 has. But we'll look into this. I mean, we've got a good relationship with the city's 311 staff, and we'll see if we can't streamline that process a bit. Thanks for that comment.
And so, Alonzo, this may be an infrastructure question. Orange Mound goes out when the wind blows hard. I've been out of my home 3 times since December for 5 or more days each time. I don't see a significant reduction in my bill. And also street lights in front of my home was out for 3 months. This is an Orange Mound issue, Alonzo?
Yes, so we do have a reliability section that will take a look at your service, your lines, and determine if there's some chronic problems that need to be addressed, and they'll walk the line. I mentioned again, tree trimming is important, and we got to get our tree trimming cycle better. But is there a way that we can get the details on that particular location, Gail?
Yeah, Don, can you see if that person could put their address in there privately?
In the chat, yeah.
Yes, in the chat or even the Q&A. Don will take care of that.
Yeah, and the same issue with the streetlights. If the streetlights have been out for a while, we need to address why they've been out and get that taken care of. Because December is a very long time for them to be out.
Well, this is one that we may have addressed. What are your plans to learn from cities and areas where winter weather happens more frequently and implement best practices for restoration and communication? I grew up in a cold winter climate and never experienced a power outage for more than a day, even once with multiple inches of ice. I can't help but think we can learn from them. And I guess it's somewhat of a benchmarking question.
Yeah, we'll be looking at the various other utilities. We've got some reports and resources that we can use as a supplement to our analysis of what we did. And we'll be looking at that and taking that into consideration. That is a very good point. Thank you.
Okay, and so here's another tree issue right here. It's stated Memphis is a tree city. Would it be possible to extend MLGW tree trimming by a few feet beyond the policy limits? I know that currently the basic setting limits are not always achievable, and of course would have to be met prior to improvements or expansion. It would seem that expanding the limits of assistance in the trimming could be beneficial, especially in light of the poverty and income limitations Memphis faces. There are few resources for this type of response. An example of this, I had MLGW contractors out yesterday. They assured me that the wires are not in danger, but approximately 8 to 9 feet above the wires are limbs from a tree which are agile winging the wires, not touching, not at risk of failing, but in the right weather, if they fall, they head directly to the lines. I admit this is not an MLGW responsibility, but given our city's limitations, could MLGW lead the way and be more proactive in the area of impact, perhaps channeling donations to support tree trimming initiatives?
That is that question and questions like that around reliability and that sort of thing is part of what this outage improvement advisory team is going to address. So we will take that information and use it with the outage improvement advisory team.
Thank you, Alonzo. So Jim, this is a question for you. If MLGW phone staff are still working from home, has MLGW put in place a tracking system to see if, this keeps going up, to see if that could be impacting call response time and even reporting time? I hear and see many high-level charts, but are the customers' experiences being tracked from the call coming in all the way up the ladder? It's hard to reach MLGW by phone. Online options are good, but not always accessible to many Memphians. So I guess the concern is the tracking of employees who are working remotely, Jim.
Yeah. So several months ago, as we were headed into the wintertime and higher bills and higher call volume, all of our phone staff, all of our call center staff are now back in the call center. That's where we have the best technology and we have the best management supervisor support. So all of our call center reps are back in the call center. So working from home is really not an issue that's affecting call center performance. If you've tried to call us, you know that we are having very busy times in the call center. And that is largely a staffing issue. We have a number of vacancies in the call center that we are trying to fill. And quite frankly, if you just read the general press, we're one of a number of companies challenged in trying to hire people. So at the moment, our biggest challenge is being able to fill some of the vacant positions that we have and bring more people in to be on the phones. And that's largely what's creating the wait times that are occurring at the moment. I just can't say enough that we'll make it any better. We are working on it. Trust me, it has our full attention, and I appreciate and ask for your continued patience with us. But yes, we track those performance measures all the way up. It's something that I look at. It's something that President Young looks at. So we pay close attention to it, and we're working hard to try to bring resources in that are going to make that better for customers and for MLGW in the future. So thank you for your continued patience on that. We've got a little bit of ways to go.
Okay, Jim, this is also for you. I think if a person's bill is estimated for 2 consecutive months and there is an overage on the bill the 3rd month, why aren't customers notified that the bill includes the overage? This should be done so the customers do not have to listen to the rude reps.
Well, let me say, if you've dealt with a rude rep, I apologize. That's never how we want to provide service. That's a very reasonable question. I don't know the answer specifically why it's not included. I suspect it's just an issue of programming the billing system to recognize exceptions like that and print it on an individual bill. Our billing system sort of designed to, produce tens of thousands of bills every day. But I will take that and look at what might be involved in that. It's a very reasonable question to ask. Occasionally, we won't get a meter read for some reason, and we'll do a estimated read. And when we catch up, if there's an overage or an underage, it's not unreasonable to expect that we ought to note that on the bill where it catches up. That's a good question I'll look into.
Okay, so Jim, don't we record all of the calls that come into the call center?
We do, actually, we do, yes.
So if our customers feel that they're being treated badly or being, someone's being rude, would it be good for them to just keep up with the day and time, estimated day and time, and we could listen to those calls and see
actually, we just
training
need a phone
opportunity?
number. Yeah, if you could just provide us with the phone number you called from, we can trace that back.
And then we will see that as a training opportunity.
Absolutely. And we do routinely listen to calls. We randomly select calls from all of our service advisors and listen to those. And if we see instances where there's a coaching opportunity, we get on that right away. But in any particular situation, if you'll just let us know who you are and the phone number you called from, we can trace that back. We can pull the recording. We can do a deep dive if you prefer.
So this next comment basically is a customer is saying, well, I know your team's working hard to restore power as quickly as possible. I'd be interested in seeing more accurate estimates on power restoration so residents can make a better decisions, I guess, possibly whether to stay home, to go to friends, relatives, or a hotel. So Alonzo or President Young, you want to tackle that about estimated time, e-tours?
Sure.
Yeah, Alonzo can handle that.
Yeah, I'll jump into the, on a small a situation where it's a limited number of people that are out, we can get pretty good on an e-tour, an estimated time of restoration. On a large event such as this, it gets very difficult. We're going to explore ways to improve that. We tend not to give an estimated time of restoration until we get a crew on site. And in a large event, that can take days. But we're going to work to try to find better ways to give customers better information. We want to improve that. And we can certainly understand the customer's frustration in that.
And that was to Alonzo's point. I just want to say to whoever's writing that or questioning that is one of the issues that we've identified that's certainly important. We all want to be kept abreast of what's happening, not just when it comes to power, but in other aspects of our lives. And as Alonzo said, one of the challenges here is around getting that assessment done in terms of being able to get somebody's eyes on that to make sure that we're doing something that's reasonable. But it's very important to make sure that we do the best we can to estimate. Part of what we found, I just will mention real quickly, in this particular storm, we have experienced teams that go out, troubleshooters and others that go out to do the assessment. The feedback we got from them that was unique about this storm was that when they historically have gone out, in particular where there are rear lot line construction areas, things behind what we call a fused circuit off the main circuit, a fuse line, historically, they refuse that line, and more than half the time it just holds and the power's back on and it's great. In Winter Storm Landon, it was about 10% of the time that worked. So the damage was much more severe, and even for our crews who are very experienced, they were seeing some things that they just historically didn't see in this storm that were somewhat unique. So I just want to mention that as well, just as an example.
Okay, thank you, President Young. One question that we have is kind of interesting. The customer is asking, has there been any discussion around MLGW, around outsourcing MLGW services, i.e. water and electricity would not be on the same bill?
Yeah, and I see that question, and I'm not quite sure the context of that. So I'm a little bit hesitant to I'm not sure exactly what this means. When this person is asking outsourcing services, I'm not really sure. So I hesitate to try to answer that. I mean, we do outsource, just to be clear, as an example, we outsource tree trimming. That's something we do outsource. Right now, we outsource a lot of different things, but I don't really know exactly what they're asking for, other than, I will say we do outsource a number of services, and maybe if they can clarify,
and I'll take a stab, and I don't know if this is exactly to the point of the question or not, but we are a little unique. We are a large 3-service utility. I've lived all over the country, and when I've had electricity, gas, and water, it's usually been from 3 different utilities with 3 different bills due at different times of the month. But we are unique in that we bill all of our services on one combined bill. In addition to that, we bill fees for third parties like the city of Memphis, city of Germantown, Shelby County, and those are also included on the MLGW bill. So we have had lots of feedback from customers about both the goods and the bads of having everything in one bill, including third-party charges. It's convenient for sure, but it is, it creates a bigger bill that's due at one time. Would that be a better customer experience if they were split up and paid in multiple bills? That's worth continued conversation with our customers and stakeholders in the future. I think it's certainly something that we can look at. Again, things related to the billing system. It seems simple when you get that printed bill in an envelope. It's a very complex piece of machinery behind the scenes that's producing that bill and everything that's on it.
Exactly. It's it's expensive to getting all those bills out, 438,000 customers. So the next question is, I see trucks in the neighborhood trimming trees, but no notice was received. So homeowners didn't know to provide access to lines at the rear of the property. Is there some way homeowners can receive a heads up?
We'll check into that. They should be getting a notice that they're coming. We'll try to verify that is actually happening.
Okay, so are looking at power companies' abilities to provide power without rolling outages. For example, what happened in Texas? This question has been answered live. Apologies, I did not hear the answer. The person didn't hear the answer about rolling outages. The examples of the power that problems that they had in Texas. Mm-hmm. So they're saying, are we looking at companies, I guess, to benchmark against to make sure we don't have what happened in Texas, the rolling outages?
So
yeah,
that's,
go ahead, Alonzo.
Yeah, that was a very unique event that happened in Texas. Hopefully it's not a frequent one. We of course want to make sure that when we pick a new power supplier, if we pick a new power supplier, that we get the same reliability that we're getting now, or at least that is a consideration. So we'll be looking at that. Rolling blackouts is not what we want to have in our community.
Okay, so what is the status of changing to LED streetlights? I understand Bartlett is making the switch.
Well, let me mention this, and Alonzo, you may want to chime in on this too. We have been working with the city of Memphis. They've been looking at, and we've done several pilots, by the way, throughout our area, the service area, with LED streetlights. But it's my understanding now that the city of Memphis is looking at, throughout the city limits of Memphis, changing out streetlights to LED streetlights, and we're working closely with them on that. I don't have an exact time frame, Alonzo, you may know, but I think they're looking at it over the next couple of years to get that done. Is that correct? Yeah,
a sizable portion of that done within the next year or so. We won't have it complete by the end of next year, but making it quite a bit of a dent in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think this is our last question. When MLGW leaves poles on your property, that they take them down, and they do not make note to come back and remove them. They're
That,
saying that the poles were taken down and people don't, then we don't go back and get them.
yeah, we should be going back to get them. Just we need to get that into the call center so we can address that.
And if you know, certainly anytime you see a situation like that, that you think it's either unsafe or, you know, otherwise inappropriate, please, please let us know. And let me mention this. You heard Jim West talk about the challenges with staffing in the customer care center. On the plus side, I will say that we are now able to do just about anything that a customer needs in terms of services through either the app or by phone. So some of those things that folks used to have to physically come in to do and take a lot of time to do can now be done a lot more conveniently. The flip side of that is that it means that call wait time, because of the services that we're providing, is a little bit longer than it was historically, but that's still a bit more convenient than maybe driving to a location, standing in line or waiting for however long. So I just want to share that. And Jim, I don't want to take any of your, but I just want to mention that from a perspective of trying to make things more convenient. I want to encourage folks who have not done so to download the My Account app. Through that app, you can do so many things that makes it so much more convenient to do business with us. But I just want to make sure everybody is aware, was aware of those things. Anyway, any more questions we got, Gail? Is that?
Actually, President Young, that was our last question. Do you have anything else to say, either of you, before I close out?
Jim, you got anything? Closing comments?
No, I think we've had a good range of questions tonight. Hopefully we gave everybody at least an answer or commitment to follow up and provide an answer.
All right, great. Alonzo, anything from you?
Nothing additional, Mr. Young. I appreciate the opportunity to come and address this group, and thank you for the questions.
So let me say thank you all for joining us. And I want everybody to understand that the feedback, the questions, the input that you've provided tonight is very, very helpful for us. We are doing the best we can to get better. We know we've got gaps, and we certainly are learning from those gaps. I saw a question in there that was asking about, are we trying to learn things from other utilities that may have had issues in ice storms? The answer to that is yes, we certainly are. We're trying to engage with our peers in a number of ways to get best practices and to learn how to be better. So this session and sessions like this are very helpful for us. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to say to Gail and your team, thank you for pulling this together. We look forward to continuing to serve you. As you know, serving you is what we do. We want to do it better, and we want to continue to make sure that we are meeting your needs in manners that you expect us to do that. And so thank you again for being with us tonight. We're blessed to serve you, privileged, really honored to do that. And we just thank you for the way that you've allowed us to interact with you tonight. Gail?
And thank you, President Young, and Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer Alonzo Weaver, and our VP and Chief Customer Officer Jim Young, for sharing valuable information for our customers.
Jim West.
I do want to thank our customers for joining in on today's Power Hour meeting, and our next Power Hour meeting will be May 19th. We will see you in May. But before we go, please take the 3-question survey after today's meeting. We really need your feedback, so it will help us to continue to be better and provide you with the information that you need. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.